Alan Warburton has been a Toastmaster for over a decade. In fact, it was 11 years ago this month that he entered his first Toastmasters contest with great trepidation. It was the Humorous Speech Contest, which many people dread. Over the years, Alan has seen that humor is an integral part of any successful speech. Having attended the Toastmasters International Convention in Cincinnati in August 2013, he saw very clear evidence of this in action. However, bringing humor into our speeches is not easy. How do you get an audience to laugh? Are there specific strategies? Can I learn to be funny? Are there any easy shortcuts to make the audience laugh? Alan believes that you can learn to be funny, to use humor in your speeches, but there are challenges. Today, he will provide 3 key strategies to help you bring humor into your speeches. So please listen for the 3 key strategies. Alan has reached the District 21 Humorous Speech Contest Finals on 4 occasions and is a 2-time winner in 06 and 07. On the other 2 occasions, he was disqualified for going over time. Now, you may think that's funny, clearly, some of you do, but apparently Alan doesn't think it's funny, so you know. Please welcome Alan Warburton with his workshop titled Rhinos, the letters standing for Risking Humour in Our Speeches. Please welcome Alan Warburton.
Thank you, Robert. Fellow Toastmasters, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start with a couple of stories. As Robert mentioned, I joined Toastmasters over a decade ago. It was January of 2003. And on the very day that I joined, another fellow joined. His name was Kelvin Neufeld. And the 2 of us got it right away. We loved Toastmasters. And we went regularly to the meetings. And 5 months later in May, I turned up at the regular meeting and saw on the agenda an item which said, election of officers for next year. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder how they do that. 5 minutes later, I found out. I was nominated, seconded, and elected as club president. Kelvin, who I mentioned before, joined on the same day as me, was nominated, seconded, and elected as VP of Ed. So you had these 2 rookies who didn't know what they were doing. But we muddled by. And it came to September, and Kelvin called me one day. Alan, he said, I've got a problem. He said, we've got the club contests coming up. And I said, club contests? What are they? He said, well, they have these contests. I said, do they really? I didn't know that. He said, well, they do. Anyway, this fall, they have a table topics contest and a humorous speech contest. Now, I'm fine as far as the table topics are concerned. Several people will go into that, but I can't find one single member to go into the humorous speech contest. Would you go into the humorous speech contest? Oh, Kelvin, that would be a real stretch for me. And he responded with an answer that I've never forgotten. He said, Alan, if you didn't join Toastmasters to stretch yourself, why did you join? I went into the humorous speech contest. The second story took place last summer. I was involved in preparing for the World Championship of Public Speaking in Cincinnati, Ohio. I was privileged to be this District 21 representative. And I was going around from club to club. At one particular club, I saw something that just horrified me. And it was done by a very experienced Toastmaster who a number of you here, I'm sure would know. I'm not going to say the name, because it was so bad. But this individual was the table topics master, and the table topics was the first part of the meeting. And he asked a question, and then directed it, this is his first question, to a guest. His first time in a Toastmasters meeting. He'd never seen table topics. And here was the question. If you had the opportunity to chat with and learn from a famous person, past or present, who would it be and why? Well, this poor fella, sitting there, he kind of got up and he did a 360. I thought he was going to sit down again, but he actually stayed standing. And then very, very slowly, he walked down the side and up to the front of the meeting. And he stood there, and for the longest time there was this pause. And then he said, in a very clear voice, Steve Jobs. Because Steve Jobs not only got his people to think outside the box, he got them to get out of their comfort zone. Now, for me personally, I like to be in my comfort zone. I'm safe there. But I totally get it, that the magic in life happens when you get out of your comfort zone and do things you didn't think you could do. Well, I went from feeling sorry for this fella to hanging on to every word. The magic in life happens when you get out of your comfort zone and do things you thought you couldn't do. Why would I tell you these stories? I'm telling them to you because they deal with stretching yourself and getting out of your comfort zone, because I believe up front in this particular workshop, we need to understand that if we're going to use humour in our speeches, probably that's going to happen. You're going to need to stretch yourself. You're going to need to step right out of your comfort zone. So if, as I go through these 3 strategies this evening, you think, oh, for goodness sake, that's all right for you, but I can't do that. Please check yourself and think, well, maybe I could. Maybe I could stretch myself to do that. Because it's the old thing. That's why I call this workshop Rhinos. Risking humour in our speeches. There's something about the rhino, you know. They've got this great big thick skin, and they've got a tusk that goes like that. And it's basically saying, yeah, I can do that. I can take on this risk. Because where there's a risk, there's a reward. And the reward is very rich. If you bring humour into your speeches, you will have the audience listening that much more attentively. Last year, when I was in Cincinnati at the World Championships, as a participant, I saw many speeches. Different semi-final speeches, the final speeches, many speeches. Every single one, without exception, was laced with humour. The most successful speeches were the ones that had the most humour. So, if you do not bring humour into your speeches, you're doing yourself and your audience a disservice. Can we do it? Are there steps to take? Are there easy measures? I don't think anything is easy around humour. But I believe there are 3 strategies that I can help you with, that I've used in my speeches, both in humorous speeches and in regular speeches when I'm trying to incorporate humour, that hopefully you could take away and apply to opportunities you have to bring humour into your speeches. Is there anybody here going into the Humorous Speech Contest this fall? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm hoping by the end of this session that's at least doubled. Congratulations to you people for doing that. Let's just look at these 3 different strategies. And to do it, I'm going to take a speech that I did in the 2009 District 21 Humorous Speech Contest. It's called Recalculating. And it was a speech. Guess what happened at that when I did this, by the way? I was disqualified, exactly. I went over time, so this is a speech I have no idea whether or not it would have been successful, but I enjoy doing it, but more than that, I think it really exemplifies the three strategies I'm talking about this evening. So let's go into this then. What I'm going to do is to break the speech down into 5 sections. I'll do a section at a time, and as we go through, I'll explain the different strategies, and hopefully the speech, as it's broken down, will illustrate for you what I'm trying to share with you as a strategy. Now, I don't have a handout for you, because that would be my notes. If you want to write something down, they're your notes. But I would suggest you write this one down. This is the first strategy. Never, ever, 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 you sure you got those all down there? Let the truth interfere with a good story. Now, this is very difficult for Toastmasters. Toastmasters, you probably found out, are extremely ethical people, somewhat conservative. They like to do things the correct way. So if you say to them, stretch your stories and make them more than they actually are, exaggerate, enhance, embellish, I can't do that. It didn't actually happen. Well, who cares? It's your story. Bring it in. Do what you will with it. It's based on a true story, so that's good enough. So let me get into this with the first part of it, and this is the introduction. And with any introduction in a humorous speech, I'm talking tonight about humorous speeches specifically, as well as bringing humor into a regular speech, okay? But let's just say for any speech, but particularly for a humorous speech, when you start it off, you need to take your audience right there. So I'm going to start off with the first part here, and you can let me know whether or not I took you right there to what this is about. I'm sort of saying, my speech tonight is about, but you just take people right there. Okay, this is the first part. I hate those GPS things. I can't stand them. I hate the way that disembodied voice tells you where to go. And I particularly dislike it when you make a mistake and that voice says, recalculating. I'm a map man myself. I like to take out my maps, lay them out, chart my own course and my own direction. But I hate those GPS things. Okay, that's the intro. What's it about? What's the speech about? GPS, thank you. Was that in any way amusing? Maybe. What if it was amusing? What made it amusing? The voice? You can relate? Okay, good, thank you. One person can anyway.
The emphasis. Just how much you hate it.
Okay, so that whole idea of being a grumpy old man. So you're taking a strong position. It's actually quite amusing when you take a strong position on anything, whatever it may be, because you can make it much bigger than it actually is. Okay, now we're going to go into the second part, and this is where there was a story. The story was told to my wife and I when we were having dinner with friends. And I thought, this is a funny story. And I said to my wife on the way home, I ought to use that in a humorous speech contest sometime. So I did, but I've embellished it. I've exaggerated. I've added on more than was actually there. So as I go through this section, see if you can spot or see if you can have an idea of how I have embellished this part of it. Okay. So this is section number 2. I was introduced to the GPS a number of years ago. We have some good friends, Margaret and Ian. They're a Scottish couple who live in Tawasin. And Ian is one of these people who loves gadgets. So when the GPS came on the market, Ian got one. Soon thereafter, he and Margaret were driving out of their complex. Margaret was behind the wheel when she heard this voice. In 0.1 mile, turn right. Oh, for heaven's sake, Ian, turn that stupid thing off. I don't need some silly voice to tell me where I'm going. I know where I'm going. Oh, no, Margaret. It's very good. It's like an insurance policy. It'll guarantee that we get to where we're going. Oh, for goodness sake, Ian. We're only going to the Safeway. And I know my way to the Safeway. I don't need some ridiculous machine to tell me how to get there. In 0.5 miles, turn right. And if you think I'm going to listen to you, buddy, you've got another thing coming. I'm the one who's driving this car. I'll make decisions whether we go right or left. I'm not going to go right. I'm going to go left. Here I go. Ha-ha! Oh, no, Margaret, no. Recalculating. Turn right, then turn right again. Not on your Nelly, buddy. I've already told you I'm running the show here. I'll make all the decisions about this car. Ha! I'm not going to go right. I'm going to go left. Here I go. Ha ha! Oh, no, Margaret, no. Recalculating. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we need to be really wary of the GPS. It even has the potential to break up relationships. So there's that part there. Any thoughts on what I may have added to exaggerate and embellish?
Her reactions, the extent of her reaction.
Reaction to what?
She's saying, I'm not doing that, I'm going to do whatever I want to, and look, watch me, and all that kind of stuff.
To the GPS? Really? Yes. Did you want to have something about?
Yeah, you made her sound like a queen.
I won't say anything at this time, but so yeah, that actually was right. That what I added with the story as they told it. Margaret and Ian are a couple. I mean, they're great fun, but they always are going at each other. So this thing in the car between the two of them was the basic story, and it was very funny. I threw in the GPS, Margaret interacting with the GPS, to the GPS. So what you had then was, rather than two characters, you were able to create three characters, which then embellished it a bit more, made it a bit more ridiculous perhaps, but hopefully added to the humor. Does that make sense? So the essence of the story is exactly right on. That's the story that happened with Margaret and Ian. It's just the bit about the GPS and the interaction with the GPS that didn't happen. All right, now for this particular speech, that was the story that I had. And sometimes it works that way. It's a short story. It's 2 minutes. That's all you've got. So obviously I have to do something with that. I've got to take that story, link it to something that takes me somewhere else, to another story or another aspect of it. You may have a humorous speech that is long enough that you don't have to do what I'm doing here. But what I'm trying to say is sometimes you've got a shorter story and you think, that's not long enough. But you can make it long enough. You can take it and then add to it. So I need to get from where I am with Margaret and Ian into Austin to somewhere else. And that's what happens in the third part of the speech. So let's go through to that. I don't know if you know, but in the UK, they don't call it a GPS. They call it a sat-nav, short for satellite navigation system. A few years ago, my wife and I were in the UK visiting family, and I noticed on the front page of a major daily newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, an article about a sat-nav company that was negotiating with, if you can believe it, Bob Dylan, to use his voice on their system. I mean, can you imagine it? Dylan. Hey man, don't think twice, just turn right. But the more I thought about it, the more ridiculous it seemed to me. I mean, if you're going to have a voice, a famous voice, on a sat-nav system, it needs to be a voice of authority, a voice with excellent diction, a voice that almost compels you to obey it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that there was really only one famous person who checked off all those boxes. And that, of course, is the Queen. Going back to that. So I've taken it then from Tsawwassen to England to the Queen. Okay. So what has happened in this second section with Margaret and Ian, and also in that section where I talked about Bob Dylan, what else have I done that may have added to the humour of the speech so far?
More characters.
Characters, okay. And with those characters came what? Voices. This is strategy number 2. It's a challenging one, but that's what this is all about. The use of voices. What's the benefit of using accents or voices? Any thoughts on that? It goes back to what Ken said, actually. You create characters. You create characters. So in the Margaret Ian GPS section there, we had 3 characters. And it was a bit like writing a bit of a play there, with each character saying different things. Kind of a radio play type thing, where you're bouncing back and forth. And because each of those characters had a different voice, I didn't need to say to you, he said, she said, whatever. I could just go boom, 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 boom. And the back and forth, because you created those characters, makes it more interesting. I think you create characters too, so the audience kind of relates to the characters much more than what you say. The other thing is, because of the fact that you're not saying, then Margaret said, then the GPS said, or whatever, what you're doing there is you're really being time efficient. 5 to 7 minute speech, you're getting rid of all that clutter. You're just paring it down so that every line has some value and it moves along at a nice clip as you go. That particular section probably took 1.5 minutes in total, so not a heavy demand in terms of time. There's one other thing that I found when I use voices, because I do it fairly frequently, as far as my audience is concerned. Any thoughts on what that might be?
You have to know your audience.
You do, but from my perspective as the speaker, and I'm looking out at an audience, I start using a voice, guess what happens?
Reaction on it.
Okay, what's the reaction, do you think?
Mostly laughter.
A little bit of laughter may be, but certainly smiles. Certainly smiles. People start just smiling. Because it's pretty obvious up here that you're taking a risk by using different voices. I love it when I hear voices from other speakers. And I think I naturally smile to the speaker as well. So in a way, when you use voices, just by doing that, even if it's not a terrific voice that you've done, it doesn't matter. You endear yourself to the audience. You're taking a risk, and the audience appreciate the risk that you're taking. Okay. So with voices, how many people use voices in their speeches? Okay, a few people do. Let me really encourage you to look at that. Because even if it's, in your mind, it's not a very good voice, the audience will appreciate it. If you're a male doing a female voice, that's the reaction you get. If you're a female and you try and do a deep male voice, you'll get a laugh out of it. And you've created another character. You can do, little children voices, or old people voices who can barely talk. Anything you want, but just create the voices. Try the accents too. Sure, all of you can do accents if you wanted to, just try those. So there's probably the riskiest of the 3 strategies, but I encourage you strongly to bring it in, and you'll be surprised at what a difference it makes. All right, so we've got to the Queen. Where are we going to take it now? So this is strategy number 3. And I like to call this strategy, what if? So in other words, you're taking something, the idea of Margaret and Ian in the car, and then taking it to England and then the newspaper and so on. That's all reality. It's something that makes sense, it's real, and you now go off into the realm of the ridiculous. You take it into fantasy. You use your imagination and take it somewhere that doesn't really make sense, but I grew up in England with the typical British humour. Anybody here know The Goon Show and Tony Hancock's Half Hour and that sort of thing? Some people do. Yes, old Brits here. Wonderful stuff. And later on you got Monty Python and you got Mr. Bean and all this sort of stuff. Ridiculous stuff. But you know what? It's the stuff that gets the biggest laughs. But you have to build to get there. So you will hear in this next section, section number 4, I'm going to use the words what if a couple of times. And you'll see where we go with this. So remember that this part of it is something that was purely my imagination. I just took it and ran with it, and this is how it came out. I don't remember where I am now. So it's, okay. The last thing I said was that the only person I could think about was the Queen. My husband and I would like to welcome you to our sat-nav company. We wish to reassure you that we will do everything in our power to make your journeys as stress-free and time-efficient as possible. Now, let us begin. In 0.5 of a mile, turn right, and then take the 4th exit from the roundabout. Now, what if? What if there was a driver out there who decided to do a Margaret and deliberately disobey the Queen's instructions? And what if, through some marvel of technology, the Queen was actually able to interact with this person who was deliberately disobeying her? Excuse me? That is the 4th time consecutively that you have deliberately disobeyed my instructions. I can only believe that you can't be British. In any event, it is entirely unacceptable. The situation needs to be rectified immediately, or there will be dire consequences. Let us try again. In 0.5 of a mile, turn right! But our disobedient driver is very determined, and he goes left. Excuse me! This is beyond the realm of a belief! You really remind me of my son Charles, who even at age 64 still doesn't seem to have a sense of purpose or direction. You have cooked your goose. Your contract with this sat-nav company is rescinded forthwith. So that's the ridiculous. But you can see what you can do with it. You take an idea which has rooted in reality, and you take it into something which is unreal and silly, but as far as I could see around the room, almost everybody came along with it on that journey with me, because it's fun to do that. We love to make up these things, and honestly, as I said earlier on, it does tend to get the largest laughs. Any thoughts on that at all? The whole idea of what if?
Taking it to the ridiculous is really scary. Almost like Daffy Duck or whatever, you see it on TV and you hear it, but can you actually do it? You did it.
You can do it. You can do it. It's not something that we maybe think about doing very often, but if you're consciously thinking about it, consciously thinking about an idea of, where can I take this? What can I do with it? I mean, I don't know where you get your speech ideas, but I get mine when I'm Ian. Where do you get your speech ideas?
That's where you're going.
I was just
listening to you, Al. That's right.
All right. Well, a lot of my speech ideas come walking the dog or riding a bike, when your mind is off, just free, really. And then I just kind of play around with ideas and just see what comes. But if you've never done that, you think, well, I can't do that. But I think we can. I really do.
When you take it to the ridiculous, there's always your mother's voice in the back of your mind. You're being ridiculous.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Did you want to add something in?
I just think it's a wonderful technique you're using it, and you see this technique a lot in modern stand-up comedy. It actually allows you to extend laughs. Judy Carter, a well-known comedian and coach, talks about going to mechanic and how mechanics intimidate her and they can tell her anything. Well, the reason you got a problem here is because there's a unicorn jumping around in your muffler. A unicorn, really? I had no idea. And then she uses Alan's technique of what if. What if this guy was a kindergarten teacher? And then she goes to talk about how this abusive mechanic would explain coloring to a kindergarten student. And she extends the laughter. You can get lots of extra laughs by using that what if technique and then going and take the same concept and reapplying it in the new situation. So I just think it's a brilliant technique.
Okay, so that's really it too, isn't it? Taking a concept and applying it into a new situation that you can create. That's really the essence of it. All right, the last part is just the conclusion, and what I would suggest to you with any speech, but certainly with a humorous speech, that you bring it all the way around. Bring it full circle. Bring it around. I have used a strategy for a number of years now that I often come back and finish off where I started off. And often it will be with the title. So my title is Recalculating, which has people going, wondering about it, rather than what can go wrong with a GPS or something rather mundane. You try and create something that's different. And then you may be able to incorporate it in the speech. And you'll see, as I go to the finish here, I want to make it complete and round it off by using the title to help me with that. So this is the last part of it. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that we have incontrovertible evidence that the GPS, the sat-nav, can be hazardous to your psychological health. I urge you to throw away your GPS. Bring out your maps. Chart your own course and your own direction. And in that way, you will never, ever have to hear that dreaded word. Recalculating. So that's the finish of the speech. Finish of the recalculating speech. Not on what I'm talking about now. But just to recap very quickly. 3 strategies that I've talked about tonight. Remember that you're going to stretch yourself with each of them. But have a go. Start off with one maybe, or a couple. If you're doing a humorous speech in the fall, maybe try and incorporate a little bit of one in there. So the first one was, never let the with a good story. Feel free to exaggerate, enhance, and embellish. It's not a problem. The second one was to use as many voices and accents, create your characters, and let your characters interact with each other, because when you do, you make it so much more fun. It's very time efficient in doing it that way, and you endear yourself to your audience. And the final one is, what if? Taking the idea, as Ian was saying, from one situation into another that you create, that you have control over. And therefore, when you have control over it, you can make it as ridiculous as you want to. Funnily enough, the idea of the Queen being on the GPS system, I don't know whether you know, but a couple of years ago, some bright, enterprising individual took the Queen's voice from all sorts of different speeches and so on, and set it up so that she was actually the voice on a GPS. And when you arrived at your destination, it finished by saying, "One has arrived at one's destination." I thought was kind of delightful. Anyway, anybody here encouraged to step forward and get into the Humorous Speech Contest this fall? Anybody beyond the 5 who already did? Please raise your hands. You going to do it? Barbara's going to do it? Are you going to do it too? And you as well? And wonderful! If we've got 100% more than we had at the pit. Now, is that a commitment from you people? Fantastic. Wonderful. Enjoy it, and particularly enjoy the growth you'll experience by getting up here and doing it. It is a risk, but the reward is well worth it.